Okay, so next news topic. A lot of PlayStation news this week, and we're going to kick off with the announcement that two PlayStation CEOs are actually going to be replacing Jim Ryan, who was one PlayStation CEO. And they seem to have split it into software and hardware and platform, and taking care of the software side of things. Good news, I guess, because we've actually got a game developer doing it. It's Herman Holst from ex-Guerrilla Games. He recently took over the full gamut of Sony studios. He stepped up. And secondly, on the hardware slash platform side, Hideaki Nishino, I think we met him, didn't we, John, virtually to talk about the PlayStation 5 interface?
I believe so. He had a lot of cool stuff in his background, if I remember as well.
So yeah, that's just basically some
Cool.
corporate news on what's happening at PlayStation. Seems like good news on the face of it to actually have experienced people who've been at the coalface, so to speak, taking over those roles. Secondly, we have news that there's now been a total of 59 million PlayStation 5 consoles shipped. Helldivers seems to have been a gigantic, massive success for Sony, possibly its biggest launch of the generation. Which obviously opens up some interesting questions about
Actually.
Ever.
It's being said that it's the fastest selling first party game they've ever released.
You're quite right. Yeah. Sales far exceeding expectations. 12 million copies. Wow. Sold across PC and PlayStation 5 in its first 12 weeks. John, what do you think about that? Do you think you actually floated the possibility on X/Twitter this week that they should just go all in on multi-platform launches.
And people didn't like that.
People didn't like that, did
People
they?
did not like that. And thinking more about it, I would say that the multi-platform strategy that they've currently kind of discussed does probably make the most sense for now, where multiplayer focused games, specific things that make sense on the PC, should launch day and date on PC. But I guess I can see the argument that the more cinematic style, the bigger, those types of releases, maybe there is something to be said for having it only on one platform initially, and then showing up as a PC port perhaps later. I would at least like to see the PC port period reduced a little bit, maybe, but again, I guess another benefit though of launching those games just for one console is the development studio can put all their focus onto making sure that singular version is good. PC ports are obviously rough. I can imagine it would be very stressful for a studio like Nixie's to launch day and date with a console game, because the console game will have been in flux, the code base, throughout a lot of its development, right? And they would obviously be limited by that, which would make their job even more difficult. So maybe it's not always the best move. I assume Helldivers is a case where it was being developed simultaneously internally for PC and PS5 because it was, a multiplayer game where they can play together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I guess the most logical thing for now is just doing it on a case by case basis and see where it ends up. But clearly in this case, it paid off gigantically in a way that actually surprised me. Although, I mean, because Helldivers 2 technically it's kind of the same as the original Helldivers. It's just they changed the camera perspective, which does make a difference in terms of intensity. But even I have to admit, I don't usually play multiplayer games guy here, I do like Helldivers 2. It is fun. The thing is, though, is it actually feels more like an older style multiplayer game, right? It does feel more like an earlier 2000s kind of thing where you just hop in, hit the button, you're just launched into a round with people if you want, and you're just going down there, you play around, have some fun, you hop back out. It doesn't have as much of the meta that we see in a lot of modern games, even though there is definitely some stuff to earn. It's not as extreme. It feels a little more pure. And I think people appreciate that. But it's also, I think these types of situations there is a sense that a lot of publishers are very focused on looking at these successes and say, I want that success too. We've got to get that success too. But this stuff happens organically and it's usually by surprise. I'm not so sure that you can engineer this kind of success in most cases. I don't think somebody can say, well, we got to have our own Helldivers 2 or that type of success and then spend 5 years trying to make that success. They probably won't have that success, right? That's what the market's kind of proven. And these ideas kind of just show up at the right time with the right audience and it just sort of spreads. And I think that's what makes this kind of business so difficult, because obviously if it hits big, as it did with Helldivers 2, but they usually don't hit like that.
You're quite right. I'm still sort of perplexed by this distinction between games that are quote unquote allowed to be multi-platform at launch and those that seem to be extremely, where the PlayStation audience seems to be extremely sort of protective about it. I mean, ultimately, what's the difference between single and multiplayer? Defining that distinction.
The main concern that I saw expressed centers on just a reason to own the platform, to get excited about the platform. It really comes down to that. And everybody's convinced that launching day and date on PC will kill the excitement around
I don't
that
see
single
it.
platform.
It didn't kill the excitement of Forza Horizon 5 or anything like that,
And that's all of these people pointed towards Xbox as a reason why this strategy is a failure. But I think that misunderstands the Xbox situation more than anything, where it's not. I don't think Xbox's failures are specifically due to always launching day and date on PC. They're much, much, much deeper than that. And a lot of it ties into the quality of the software itself. Forza Horizon 5 is one of the few that actually had a good buzz around it and was a genuinely good game. That's something Microsoft has struggled with for like the last however many years. They just aren't able to produce these types of games that get people talking by and large. Nintendo and Sony they're just flat out better at doing that right now. Right. But I think they've reached the point. I mean, that's a whole different conversation of their strategy changing. But so I think I see the point of people wanting it to stay exclusive, but I also understand like this isn't just like copying the Xbox model either, and it wouldn't necessarily spell disaster for them.
No,
I would say.
Not. I mean, people need to understand that the target market for a console is different to the target market for the PC, quite substantially so. You can't have a PC logistically working nicely in the living room connected to your TV. It's a different type of model. Just as
you can, but
well, not in a way that's acceptable to the mainstream.
No, not at all.
So the concept of PCs being in living rooms is an extremely niche thing. Similarly, the concept of PCs being in bedrooms is a niche thing relative to the console space as well. Let's say you've got people who just can't be bothered with wanting to tweak settings or install driver updates or something like that. They're two entirely separate markets. Where I accept that there are logistical issues is in the quality of the ports.
Right.
And Nixis have told us that it takes them a year to basically port a PlayStation 5 game over to PC. Now, if that's the amount of time it takes, fine, right? What I will say, though, is that the longer the time gap between the console release and the PC version, the fewer the PC version sales you're going to get, simply because you're lacking the bulk of the marketing oomph that was put behind the initial launch. So I think there is very definitely a discussion to be had about trying to reduce that gap from, well, it's like 2 years at the moment, isn't it? Trying to reduce that gap down to a year maximum, or better yet, like, 3 or 4 months. And I think that still wouldn't upset the console users that much, because they would have moved on to the next thing at that point.
There is still an argument to be made, though, that launching on PC incurs fees. If you're launching on Steam, for instance, there are Steam fees. They basically lose 30%, I would say, on each unit sold, versus when they sell it on the PlayStation Store or sell a retail copy. So that could potentially have a negative impact, I would say.
Yeah, potentially.
Something to consider.
Yeah. Which again,
they don't have, unlike Microsoft, which, for better or for worse, Microsoft has tried their own store within Windows and most people hated it. Sony hasn't gone that far yet, and hopefully they don't. So I think so far, at least, they understand that the PC audience wants their games on Steam, but obviously Steam, they take a cut. So if they try to get that cut back and launch their own store, I could see why, but I also could see that ending in disaster for them.
Well, just make the store good, right? Good features.
Even if it's good.
Cross-compatibility with PlayStation.
And I'm not convinced it would be, but even if it is good, I think PC gamers, and me included, are tired of these extra darn launchers. We don't want to put our credit card information into all these different systems. Although on PlayStation, I guess there's more likely you'd already have a console set up, so maybe it's a little easier there. But still, like, just, I don't know. Are you guys like happy to keep installing more of these launcher apps? Because I'm kind of tired of them. I don't like having so many of them.
Launchers are a huge pain, especially with like Steam Deck. It just makes.
Oh yeah, exactly. When you get into Steam Deck, it gets even worse. It's just like you have to jump through hoops to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not great that Valve has an effective monopoly or close to a monopoly on the sale of PC game keys through storefronts.
I would say this though, Oliver. They are at least a private company. They are not publicly traded, which that alone is pleasing because they're not beholden to the typical shareholders that have caused so many other issues. I know it's a bit naive and simplistic to say it, but that is one benefit of Valve in its current form.
Anything to add to that, Oliver?
No, I mean, I think that Helldivers 2 is awesome. I think it's a great game. I'm glad to see it being successful. Although I do kind of wonder, like, is this just one of those titles that's going to end up as like a forever title, like Roblox, like Minecraft, like Call of Duty, like
that's what they want.
Yeah, but then if it just kind of gets up in that echelon of games, like maybe this is not really a replicable success. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if these every so often, every one and however many titles that aim to do this just becomes this game that monopolizes player time and attention.
I'm skeptical about that because you say stuff like Roblox, Minecraft, and the like, and those aren't just like a game, right? They're like a thing. It's much, much, much more than like a single game. Those are actually, that may as well be a launcher onto itself. Like Roblox especially is basically a framework for different games, and that's why kids love the heck out of it. Whereas Helldivers 2 is one specific thing, and it may last for a while, but I don't think it's comparable to that sort of platform. And even Fortnite, which started as kind of its own thing, is obviously expanded out significantly.
Sure.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of other PlayStation news released this week. There was an interesting tweet from Stephen Totillo saying that we've got a pretty big number of active users, monthly active users on PlayStation, 118 million. That's not insignificant. However, half of them are still on PlayStation 4. Half of them, 3.5 years into the console generation. That's quite remarkable. And also some shipping news from other sources. They seem to be, I'm not sure it's official sources as such. It seems to be research firms. Nico Partners, shared on X by Daniel Ahmed, the company's director of research and insights, basically saying that Sony shipped 4.5 million PlayStation 5 units during the 3 months ending in March, 59.3 million shipped total. However, there seems to be a vastly reduced amount of Xbox consoles shipped. It's saying it's 5-to-1 ratio. It could actually be a bit higher. I also saw a figure of 800,000 Xbox consoles shifted. PlayStation seems to be kind of matching or slightly beneath the sales curve of PlayStation 4 during its life cycle, but there is expected to be decline going forward. John, this Xbox stuff, I mean, it just continues to be bad news for Xbox seemingly. In actual fact, we got this supporter question from I_like_licorice. Hey DF, exclamation point, with the recent news that PS5 outsells Xbox 5-to-1. Well, let's first of all say they shipped 5 more times more units than Xbox Shipping isn't sell-through, I think it's safe to say. But anyway, I think it's safe to say that Xbox Series XS is a failure, especially considering it's released by Microsoft, which has access to unimaginable capital, and they expect a high return on investment from their products. If I'm not wrong about the current Xbox being a failure, why did it go this way? Is it really because of the power of first-party Sony games? Also in Europe, where I live, a quote-unquote console is often synonymous to a quote-unquote PlayStation. A weekend player can get a PC, a console, or a Nintendo. Finally, Sony consoles have always been great. Is it the legacy of previous systems and the nostalgia that makes the mass-market customer pick a PlayStation? Honestly, Microsoft only had a single superb console. It's not an impressive track record. Thanks! ! I think there's a couple of points I'd take issue with there. Microsoft had some excellent consoles.
Yeah.
OG Xbox, I'd say, was excellent. Came to a premature end, but it wasn't down to Microsoft.
It's sold more than the Series S and X has so far in a similar time frame too.
Yeah, 360 speaks for itself. I'd say Xbox One X was another superb console. But anyway, there is a point being made here.
The OG Xbox shipped 24 or sold 24 million estimated, and Series consoles are estimated more in the 21, 22 million, I guess, right now.
Okay.
And they've both been on the market. That would have been the same amount of time on the market, because Xbox was only on the market for like 4 years.
It does kind of suggest, I mean, shipping consoles doesn't require you to sell consoles. It just seems, I don't know what's going on here. Has Microsoft taken the foot off the gas?
Wow, the Quest 2 sold 20 million units. Dang.
These stats aren't getting any better, are they?
And Nintendo GameCube as well sold about the same as Series X and S.
Do you think this is at a corporate level, just, handling a difficult transition period into whatever Xbox 2.0 is?
I don't know. I think we can all kind of agree that there's many challenges with the way Xbox Series launched. It felt more like Xbox One X2. You know what I mean? And PS5 suffers from this to a degree as well, I'd argue, but it's especially true here. From the same dashboard, it basically didn't have any launch titles. Like, all the games that were available on day one were basically just like also Xbox One games. It just didn't feel like an event. And then despite all their studio acquisitions, they've really struggled to get like games out the door. Like, there's been good games coming out from Xbox, but most of them just don't get the attention, or they're not on par with the best from Nintendo or Sony. And I really think there's like a perception problem that's kind of just fed out over time that they've not been able to beat back. I think things would have looked different a little bit, possibly. So this is a lot of what if, but like, the original plan was Halo Infinite was going to be a launch title. And when you look at the original trailer for Halo Infinite, there's original ambitions. If they had managed to actually deliver Halo Infinite and live it up to those promises and really feel like the return of Halo, I think that would have absolutely changed the fortunes of Xbox Series X and S. Yeah. But I really think that 343 holds a not insignificant amount of quote unquote blame for the state of Xbox, in a weird way. Like, their stumbles and inability to deliver on Halo Infinite. It was a year late and nowhere near what people had hoped. I mean, the multiplayer is at least recovered somewhat, but the campaign is still, it's not what many of us wanted, I will say.
I think, the nature of the business is that it's changing, right? 50% of active PlayStation users still being on PS4 is indicative that their initial stated aim to get people moved on to PlayStation 5 as quickly as possible, I'd say that has also been a failure. I mean, it's just been the fact that these persistent games, your Fortnites, they're
moving at the same speed as PS4, right? Like, they're getting PS5s in the homes at a similar pace to the PS4, which is good, but it shows that because, like you say, with the way games are today, people have less of an issue just holding on and continuing to play the older machines. And I'd be curious to see what those numbers looked like in the past, like when, like PlayStation 2 launched. PS1 games continue to arrive. People continue to play on those, but because they're not online, we couldn't really have any strong indicator as to how many people were actively using it at that point, right?
What do you make of this, Oliver?
Well, I don't know. I'm really depressed by it, to be honest with you, because I think, like, actually, I know the game lineup has not been so good, but I think the Xbox hardware this generation has been very good. I think the Series X and Series S are good machines. And I think there have been some good games on Xbox for sure, even if they've been far between. In particular, this year, when you look at the lineup, it's like Hellblade, Indiana Jones, Avowed, Flight Sim 2024. I think that's a very strong lineup. Relative to Sony, it's a much stronger lineup, I think, than Sony has this year.
I agree.
So the idea of Microsoft potentially abandoning console hardware to some degree or another, obviously, it's sort of a question mark as to what the next Xbox hardware will look like. I just think that's kind of an unfortunate question. I think the writing is probably on the wall to some degree for this generation, given the current balance of sales. I mean, it certainly seems like a pretty dire situation. But I think, like, definitely the situation could get better, pivoting to more interesting hardware configurations, doing more with PC. I mean, there's obviously a roadmap that they seem to be following at this point, although it does seem to be changing frequently. But just this essential balance between the PlayStation and Xbox has been something that we did see in the 360 PS3 generation. I personally thought that was a great generation for games in a lot of respects. It's something we saw a little bit more of last generation relative to this generation. And now that's sort of falling away. I understand the factors that are behind it, but I still think, hey, you know, the Xbox Series hardware, it's still good. It still should have a place in the market. And frankly, I'm surprised that it's being outsold by the degree that it is.
Okay.
Rich, I have another factoid on sales numbers. Do you know that the Master System sold almost 13 million units?
1-3 or 3-0?
1-3.
Okay.
That's not, you know, that's pretty good for the Master System.
You trying to goad me?
A little bit. You want to play some Afterburner 2?
Not on the Master System. Saw your Sunsoft video where even the NES version caned it.
It did. Oh my goodness.
Dear. Yeah. We somehow got from PlayStation 5 to the Master System.
I agree with you there, Oliver, by the way. I wanted to chime in and say that I actually think the Series X specifically is the best piece of hardware Microsoft's ever made. Like, I just think it's a really nicely architected machine with a lot of smart design features. It works super well with all the modern standards and just delivers a lot of oomph. It's great. It's just like, it hasn't, their whole business shifted so much that it's no longer about that, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's a lot of love gone into Xbox and a lot of great features there. I mean, historically, their support for different displays has just been first class. I mean, go back to Xbox 360, VGA component, HDMI, and obviously they had those supports for all of those arbitrary resolutions. It's just fantastic. And then, you know, once we move into the Xbox One and the Xbox Series era, their support for forward-looking features on the cutting-edge displays is still first class. Yep. You know, the VRR stuff in particular is standing out right now. But, you know, what can you say? They've really produced some really great stuff. The back compat stuff just, you know, still boggles my mind as to how they are able to do
so good.
So hopefully they can take those wins going forward into whatever they're planning next. And, you know, there's been a lot of, I noticed there was another supporter question, you know, there seems to be this assumption that Xbox is writing off hardware. Then they're not. There will be a 10th gen Xbox. It's just the nature of it might be slightly different to what we've previously come to expect. But the core functionality, the idea of a box that sits in the living room, plug and play, easily plays all the latest games, that's not going to go away. So, you know, the fundamentals will still be there.